I wanted to record a little rant about an idea that I had about a week and a half ago. And it's not going to be an angry rant, but I'd consider it a rant nonetheless because it's just going to be a stream of ideas and thoughts that are really value laden in one sense or another and opinionated. And I was going to call this rant something about meditation and hypnosis. And instead, I've decided to title it Beware of Rectangles. And you'll find out why. But in any case, this year I've challenged myself to what I called a Resolute Salute project. This year is 2012 in the Western calendar, which really is absolutely meaningless to me. But to some people leading into this year, especially a new age crowd, the idea was that this was going to be the end of the world based on some kind of Mayan calendar or something. What they don't understand, I guess, is that most calendars of cultures of the world, indigenous cultures especially, are not linear and they're cyclical, and so they all have these turnovers that occur, and we're not counting toward anywhere. So this idea of there being a number 2012 that's especially meaningful is, to me, pretty ludicrous. But in any case, I do feel like we need an end of the world, not an end of the world like an apocalyptic end of the world kind of a thing, but we need an end to a resolve to a lot of issues that contemporary society has, because we're living in ways that are completely unsustainable. So I thought I would take the opportunity to say, yeah, in 2012 the world is going to change. At least it's going to change for me in my life, because I'm going to do some things that are potentially world changing. Perhaps they won't influence that many others, that other people's realities will change, but mine's going to change this year. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to make one resolution every day. So this being a leap year in the Western calendar, that means I'm going to make 366 resolutions. And once in a while, I've got caught up on a day when I couldn't figure out what my resolution for the day was going to be. And other times, like on this occasion, I had a good idea of what I wanted to do for my resolution, but I was having real difficulty putting it into words because the idea itself was not crystallized enough to articulate in writing. And when I'm writing, I try to make my the presentation of my ideas closed and completed and such, and that just wasn't happening for me with this idea. In fact, there's a general confusion for me still about some of the content of what I'm going to talk about some of the concepts, and there's a language issue involved. There's things that I think maybe I could express better in a different language than English. And there's words with a lot of overlapping, there's concepts with a lot of overlapping meaning. Like, what is the difference, for instance, between hypnosis and meditation? I don't really know. I'm going to speculate a little bit and try to frame these concepts within the context of this rant. But in any case, I wasn't able to write it out, and so I thought, well, maybe it would be best if I videotaped or recorded some of my ideas and put them to images and put that out there instead for the people that I want to share what I'm doing with. So, what brought this particular focus on the topic and the idea I'm going to discuss today, what brought it about were two things. One, I've been struggling with, as a part of the Resolute Salute project, withdrawing my participation from the tobacco industry. And I'm a guy who smokes, who normally smokes at least a pack a day, and have been doing so since about the time I was 18, with exception of a couple of brief, like year-long type of abstinences. But other than that, I've been a smoker for over half my life. And really, I want to quit smoking for two reasons, and one is for health reasons, and the other is because part of my Resolute Salute project is withdrawing my participation from big non-local industries that are disturbing our environment, tobacco certainly being one of these industries. So as I've been working on quitting smoking, and I have made some really big headway the last few weeks, as I challenged myself with a strategy that my mom used to use to get me to earn things. But in any case, I've been making headway there, but it's been a lot of mental work, and in that mental work, I've come to appreciate some things about the way my thought process and probably other people's thought process work. So some of that went into this. The other thing that went into it is I shared some of the resolutions that I'd made with a man who I very much respect recently, and when he heard that I had, for instance, given up eating several different types of tropical fruit that everybody now eats, things like bananas or oranges or pineapples, these kind of things. When he heard that I'd given up shopping at Walmart or buying any food from a restaurant chain, buying any fast food, and these kind of things that I was doing, he attempted to basically tell me that it wasn't going to solve anything. He said, well, Ryan, you have to understand, we're completely immersed in this economy. Even the shoes on your feet have come through industry, and we got to make the best of the situation, but it's not going away. And when I heard him say that, even though I respect him a great deal, what I thought was that he has some mental blocks that that he needs to work through, because I do believe that we can change the issues that our society has that are making it unsustainable. I believe we can do that. And I believe a lot of the work, at this point, I believe a lot of the work in doing that is up to individuals, and the really hard work is going to be very, very much cognitive, mental work. And so in my life, I haven't put a lot of thinking toward practices like hypnotism or meditation. And the reason I haven't done so is because, to me, these concepts and practices carry many associations with for instance, the New Age movement, um, or people that are just a little bit, fruity for my tastes, and I don't trust them. Basically, is what it comes down to. I don't trust them. They seem to be a little bit detached from reality, and so I recognize that distrust goes back quite a ways for me. In fact, I can pinpoint at least one episode where it was really solidified for me. And that was when I was about 16 years old. And I'll tell you the story. When I was 16, I went with a group of age mates in a program run by the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. And we traveled throughout the southwestern United States, visiting many active pueblos and many of the ruins of their ancestors, the old Anasazi cliff dwellings. And this expedition, which was about 3 weeks long, this journey was led by a group of naturalists. It wasn't really archaeology oriented. And so as we traveled around, our attention was directed a lot toward the environments we were having the opportunities to visit. And one of these environments, one of these places where we visited toward the end of the tour, was on the Navajo Reservation in a national park called Navajo National Monument. And in that area, it's a canyonlands, and deep in one of the less accessible canyons is an old Anasazi cliff dwelling called Keat Seal. A few of us, well, not a few, but 7 or 8 of us in a group of about 40 were going to hike out to Keat Seal. And Keat Seal's an unexcavated cliff dwelling. There's a Navajo ranger that lives out there, but it's fairly remote. I mean, you could get in there by helicopter or something like that. But the way that we were going to be able to access it was to hike in about a day's long hike down the canyon and up to Keat Seal, and then visit the ruins with the Navajo Ranger, and then sleep there in that canyon and hike out the next day. And so not everybody was able to physically handle this kind of exercise. Just about 7 or 8 of us. But to try to, in the meantime, while we were going to go down there, the rest of the group was going to probably camp in the park proper. The whole tour had been, we camped all along the way. I mean, I lived, for instance, off of Ichiban and oatmeal and peanut butter for the whole duration. So they were probably going to end up in the campgrounds in the national park, and who knows what they were going to do. But for one kind of final exercise that involved all of us at this particular park, we went to, I believe, this canyon. Now, it may have been another canyon, but it looked very much like this. And there was a pull-off, and we were in a bus, and we pulled off the side, and our guides, the naturalists, they told us, go out on the canyon rim, find a place where you can sit alone for a couple of hours and take it all in, and then this evening we'll talk about what we learned. And so this was an exercise that was it was pretty familiar with me. Personally, I'd been doing this thing. By that time, I'd been doing this exercise about 4 years or so by myself. Hadn't learned it from anybody. It was just there, and I continue to use this exercise even still today in my phonology studies. Sometimes the best way to learn from a place is to go find somewhere to sit and sit still for a couple of hours and observe what goes on around you. And so to me, that's what we were instructed to do. So I went and I found myself a place on the canyon rim that I thought I would like to sit and watch and learn from the canyon. As it happened, there was another guy about my age, and this kid chose a place to sit that wasn't too far from me. It's within sight. Most people's positions were not within my sight, but this kid's was. And it was a kind of a hoodoo rock that he chose, almost like a balanced rock on the edge of the canyon rim. And he sat down and he started doing one of these things. Now I don't know what this is, but I don't know if this is lotus position or what exactly this is, but this is the kind of thing he got into. And he closed his eyes and he went into doing whatever practice that he associates with this. And I kind of sat at where I was and chuckled quietly to myself about this kid. Because to me, he was missing the boat completely. That boat being the canyon. He was, in a way, turning inside, which is the exact opposite of the exercise that I understood we were supposed to be engaged in, which was turning externally and taking in what was happening in the canyon so that we could experience this place. It wasn't often that any of us got to go somewhere like this, and so it was an opportunity to really just have a couple of hours experiencing the place. And this kid decided to close up. So to me it was laughable what he was doing. And it became even more ridiculous a few minutes into his meditation when I happened to notice a cougar walk underneath his rock, underneath his balanced hoodoo type of rock. The cougar went from one side, walked around his rock to the other side, and disappeared from my view. And it was quick. It was only a couple of seconds that the cougar walked through. I even started to doubt myself whether I really saw it, because I'd never seen one before. And to me, you know, the cougar is not something that you see every day, if ever, even if you're in their environments. And so, but I also knew what I saw, and I suspected this kid was in danger, sitting up there completely unaware of the cougar. So I thought I should maybe call out to him and give him a warning. But then my devilish side made me reconsider. And instead, I waited to see if maybe this kid would get mauled, if the cougar would attempt to eat him. I thought that, if anything, would really teach this kid, who in my opinion was on the wrong path, a lesson about reality. And so I sat there waiting, pretty much hoping that this cougar was going to jump up and maul this kid. And even if it killed him, that was okay with me. So I know it's not a very kind thing to wish on somebody, but that's kind of how serious I am about appreciating reality. And so when I see something like this, somebody in a natural place, shutting it all out and turning inward, I see this person as somebody who has been culturally trained to not engage with reality. And I think that's part of the bigger problem that our society has, a problem which I was able to perceive by the time I was 12 years old, by the way. So in the years since this experience, and you know, obviously I had some prior notions about, some prior opinions about meditation, otherwise I wouldn't have found it laughable right off the bat, but this really solidified it for me. And it remained that way until I was at least in my mid-20s, earlier mid-20s, when I was at school at the University of Massachusetts in Boston Harbor. And there I had a mentor named Tim, who was an anthropology professor, and whose thinking I respected considerably. And Tim sourced a lot of his intellect, his discipline in scholarly matters and such, to training that he had in the meditative form that Cougar Boy was poorly emulating, and that is Zazen. And I can't speak for myself very much about Zazen because I've never practiced it. I've only got what I've heard from Tim and some other friends who I've since met who have practiced this discipline. And what Tim convinced me of is that it is very much a respectable discipline, and that it is very much an attempt to engage more fully in reality rather than to avoid it. A lot of it is about the reality of existence and the self and your own mind and how your own mind is operating, but you can infer from that the way that other people's minds are operating as well. And anyway, it's a system of disciplining the mind, and it works. And those people that I've known that have done this seriously have very good minds. So early to mid-20s, I start reconsidering. I would never go into practicing something like Zazen myself, just because it still doesn't, in many ways appeal to me. Part of, I think, why it doesn't appeal to me is because I've realized, after hearing more about formal, traditional meditative systems rather than New Age systems, I realized that I've spent a good deal of my life practicing forms of meditation. And this is one of the places where I've practiced since I was 12 years old. This field, around this tree, these forests in the background. And I never closed my eyes, and I never sat facing the wall. But I spent days on end walking in this area. And it used to be, when I started, when I was 12, there was a lot of old growth forest here, old growth Douglas fir, and it's since been cut down to make more room for wheat field and such. The big um, tree that you see here was surrounded by old growth Douglas fir when I was 12 years old. It was just on the edge of the forest, and most of that old growth forest is now gone. So, but yeah, I spent days walking out here, and in fact, this is the place where I first perceived there was a problem with Western society, and how I came about perceiving that was this field had been tilled. Actually, down below this field, there's an area where they grow onions. That was an old ancient lake bed, and that had been tilled, and I was walking across, and I found an arrowhead, and I picked up this arrowhead, and I recognized that I was in the ancient lake bed, and that the arrow was lost here, and it was still in perfect condition, and it seemed to me like it was only yesterday it might have been made. It was like that. And the old growth forest was on one side of me, and out across the field and across the creek on the other side was what I call Edward Scissorhands lands of suburbia, the kind of places that I've lived all my life. And I recognized that Edward Scissorhands land was the most recent stage in an attempt to erase our ability to perceive the reality of this place, that it actually was only yesterday that this arrowhead was made and used in this place, and that this place was an ecologically diverse place with people living sustainably at that time. And then it changed, and then it became agricultural land, monocrop, a loss of biodiversity, and then there was Edward Scissorhands land, which was just a false environment altogether, a very constructed environment. At 12 years old, this threw me for a big loop, shifted my sense of place considerably, and so I continued to return to this place, maybe looking for an alternate, a new sense of place that I could feel comfortable in. And I don't think I've ever really found that place completely, but I think I've been getting closer. But I spent days and days and days out here, and this is a place where I started having some of my first really interesting relationships with animals, in particular a red-tailed hawk, but also otters. And so this place is kind of a very formative place for me, and a lot of that time out there was spent in introspection, in meditative type practice, and that meditative type practice extended out to perceiving reality as it was, not just in my mind, but out, all around me. To me, I don't think I can engage completely in internal meditation unless I'm in an environment where that's appropriate. And in more recent years, in my 30s and going into my later 30s, I still do participate in some more esoteric yet still personal exercises that also could be categorized as meditation, although I've tended to call it trance. And the reason I've called it trance has been to distinguish it from the kind of practices that I associate with Cougar Boy. And some people have asked me why I post profile pictures on Facebook where I'm wearing this blindfold. And the reason I started doing this was because a couple of years ago, hydraulic fracturing started entering the region where I live, and I was very against it. And so this was initially a statement against hydrofracking. The statement being that all of these people who are willing to accept hydrofracking, who are willing to accept that we have to have it because of the vehicles we drive and this kind of a thing. All of these people, in my opinion, have put the blinder on themselves. They've put it on purposely to block out the reality and to block out especially other species, because this is a big part of it. People don't want to feel like they're responsible, like they have to be responsible for other species. So the best way to do that is to just put them completely out of mind. And one step in putting them completely out of mind is putting them out of sight. And so when species become conspicuous, then the people that are in this mode, that are trying to block things out, begin to express hatred of those species. And that happens a lot to the magpies and the corvids. And this, of course, is a picture with me with Derek. In my opinion, the corvids and many, many other animals are waiting for us to be human beings again. They're waiting for us to act like human beings again. And for the most part, we're wrapped up in wearing our blindfolds so that we can avoid that issue for some short-term benefits, for some short-term conveniences that aren't lasting. So that's why I post these pictures, but the blindfold has been a part of my life. Had been a part of my life for several years before the hydrofracking issue came about. And I use the blindfold to block something out too. And what I use it to block out is I use it to block out culture. Instead of blocking out reality, my blindfold blocks out culture. That's what I try to block out with it. And one of the things that I feel is that when we block out culture, it reveals that our everyday cognitive reality underneath the cultural apparatus is a trance state. I don't think trance is an alternate state of mind. I think trance is there all the time, but we are hypnotized by various institutions of our society that have put suggestions into our cognitium that we then meditate on, and in that meditation we are creating the alternate reality that most of us spend a good portion of our days living in. I don't think that any of us can avoid trance. I think that for some part of every day we're involved in trancing. Whether we like it or not, all we got to do is sit still and be bored with culture for a few minutes and we'll start trancing. And this is what I think, daydreaming's about. So this is the normal cognitive reality, I believe. And then what we experience a lot of times, the other stuff is tacked up on top of it. And how it's tacked on is, initially, it's through what I'm going to call hypnosis. And that's the distinction I'm going to make between hypnosis and meditation. I'm going to say that hypnosis, in my current thinking about it, hypnosis is when a suggestion is put into your mind. A story, could be a narrative, could be an idea, what have you. It's when that's put in you. And you can do self-hypnosis. You can put ideas in yourself very easily. And writing, a lot of times, is a way to do that. And I don't think this is any different. What I'm doing here is just another form of literacy. And I'm going to be putting things in my mind through dictating or saying this or going through this recording session. But there are more formal ways that we get hypnotized. And once we're hypnotized with a suggestion, we then take that and we catch ourselves when we're straying away from that suggestion through a form of meditation that we practice every day while we're in this state of altered reality that we mostly experience. And then we pull ourselves back from that stray into the suggested idea that we got through hypnosis. One of the things that, as I started pulling together images that would be useful in presenting this this recording, one of the things that I noticed, and this is kind of a brand new breakthrough, is that you should beware of rectangles, because rectangles in our lives are something that are used as a cue to let us know it's hypnosis time. And here's an example. This is a natural area. This is a wetlands. You can see there's some development out beyond it, but in any case, it's a wetlands area. And here's a rectangle, and that rectangle is there to make suggestions to you about how to understand and engage with this place. And it's doing a number of things at once. The recognition of the rectangle itself being important is new for me, but the problem with the interpretation is not new, and it's something that I've talked about a lot of times. And to me, this sign may as well be a tombstone, because that's what it's really saying. It's saying that you cannot engage with this place yourself and learn from it, but read the tombstone and you'll find out what the life of this place was like, because it's really being framed. And it's interesting to use that term, framed, because it suggests another rectangle. It's being framed as a dead being, this place. And how do you learn from a dead being? Either you have to autopsy it, as most mainstream Western sciences are involved in, conducting one form of autopsy or another, or you have to just preserve the body as best you can. And this is what conservation is about. Preserve the body. Maybe in the future some learning can come from it if we just preserve the body. So there's this focus on preservation, conservation, and autopsy as ways to learning from place. That's a death schema that's going on there, and that's what I see partially being presented here. But the other aspect of this, the new aspect that I'm talking about here, is the hypnosis. There are ideas being suggested to us in this place through this sign. Now, one of the most common places where we experience this type of hypnosis through the rectangle is in a classroom. Classrooms are full of rectangles, but there is one very important rectangle up here at the front of the classroom, the one with the void space. And the classroom is bland all around. You know, it's supposed to be like that. It's almost like the Zazen monastery, a bland environment that you're not going to get distracted in, so that you can focus on what goes on in the rectangle. In the middle of the rectangle, there's going to be a person standing behind another rectangle to talk to you, to make the verbal suggestions, and then he's going to write symbols up here that you can write down yourself, further put it in you, and you can go away from here and it'll be part of your tool set for your future meditations. And so this is part of what I see the classroom as, is a very formal chamber for conducting hypnosis. Before the classrooms, there were churches. And I can't say all that much about churches, in the same way that I can't say all that much about Zazen, because I've never really been to church in my life. But it seems to me the church is all about rectangles as well. And if not the church, another thing that kind of came out of the church experience, the theater, right? So in the theater, you're watching a rectangle, and you can see here, you know, people are into it, right? They're totally caught up into whatever it is that they're watching. It shows on the expressions of their face. The only person that isn't being hypnotized right now is this lady here, who's not looking at the rectangle and who's not wearing her glasses and this kind of a thing. Who knows what's up with her? But all these other people are having stories put into them. And these stories, whether they come out having enjoyed the story or not, they've been exposed to it. And that's all that has to happen with the hypnosis is exposure. Consider how many hours we expose ourselves to this rectangle from childhood on through adulthood, and the kind of stories and suggestions that come through this. I'm not going to demonize the television over other forms of hypnosis, because to me this is just as bad. Here we see the young girl reading. There's a whole ecology, a whole environment, natural environment surrounding her, and yet she's tuned into a rectangle. Every time the rectangle comes into our lives, it's a cue. It's a cue. It's hypnosis time. And our minds, whether it happens subconsciously, I think our minds go there. And in a way, to me, what happens through this process of being, hypnotized and hypnotized and hypnotized and hypnotized with our society's stories, is that we end up not being able to see the reality of the environment around us. We can't see it at all. Like this woman, who's pretty much the same as Cougar Boy. Same scenario, except she has actually chosen to go sit inside of a natural rectangle, because that's what we do when confronted with a real vivid life environment. Those of us who are considerably hypnotized will flee to the rectangle. We'll flee to the rectangle and close our eyes, shut it out, and turn inside and meditate. And what is it that we're meditating about? I really wonder. To me, this person is very likely a zombie. And many of us have become zombies. All of us, in one way or another. We're living in a zombie society, and it's not surprising, I don't think, that popular media feeds us a lot of zombie stories right now, because it's coming out one way or another that this is what we've become. We're zombies, and one thing about zombies is not only are they fairly unaware of, you know, the environment around them, and and all of that, and not only are they, plagued with this problem, but the big thing about zombies is that they are host recruiters, right? They, that is the disease that's in them has changed their bodies and is taken over and is forcing them to go after others so that disease can enter into other people. And that's how we are too. So in many cases, in all cases, in fact, we are busy not only meditating about about the suggestions that we've been hypnotized um, into knowing the stories and such, but we're also looking to share those with other people to recruit them into the same stories. And so one of the key stories that's been affecting me in my project is this story that there is an us and a them. There's a we and a them, and the them might be very, very powerful, or perceived as very, very powerful. And I'm pretty sure, like in this picture, for instance, I'm pretty sure that both sides are carrying this story. I think um, the one side is thinking we're the we and they're the they. I think the other side is thinking we're the we and they're the they. And both sides are thinking that the other one has the big problem. They're the problem with the society, not us. It's the they. And the they aspect is very overwhelming. And so when we are living with this story, our idea is to fight the they, right? We're going to fight the they, and that's how we're going to fix the problem. But to me, that's not how we're going to fix the problem, because there is no they. I think that's just one of the things that's been suggested to us through hypnosis, that there's a they. There's no they. There's only we. I think there's only we, and we are the only ones that can change anything by making the change ourselves, right? We can't change it by fighting a they. It'll never change a thing by fighting a they. It's all in us to make the changes. So this is one of the things that I've realized we've been hypnotized into believing in the they. Another thing that's put against people that are trying to make any changes is the overwhelming nature of it all. Like my friend told me recently, we're so immersed in this culture and in these industries that we can't get out of it. If there's one person here in Times Square in New York that's doing something to get out of it, they're not making any difference. You're not going to change anything. This is part of the narrative that's told to us, that story is, even if it's all about we and there is no they, we as individuals are too small. And what's really being said is this, right? This is a vole who is fending off a coyote. And the first time I saw this image, I don't know if it's the same for you, but the first time I saw it, my thinking was, yeah, that vole's in trouble. It's kind of funny at first to see him standing up to the coyote, and the coyote's like, what the hell? But that vole ultimately is going to be in trouble. But reading a little bit about, and I didn't take this photo, but reading a little bit about what happened in this scenario. Uh, what happened was that the coyote went after the vole. The vole turned on the coyote, um, and in fact, the coyote was so shocked that the vole got away. Right now, the vole got away doesn't mean there's not a coyote anymore, but it does say something about what one small being can accomplish if you put it in your mind that you're not small, or that you can fend for yourself, that you can make a difference, that you can change something that seems like it's going to be inevitable, but you can change it. If your life depends on it, like you did for this vole, you're going to try to change it. Right now, our life, whether we know it or not, whether we perceive it or not, our lives do depend on us making a change, yet we're busy with self-hypnosis to try to make sure that we avoid looking at that reality, that it is that our lives are really in danger. And I don't think, just as a side note, that it's a coincidence that the little timepiece, the Western clock, the little watch, is associated with mesmerism and um, with hypnosis, because certainly Western time plays a big role in this. And that's kind of what's blocking, a big thing that's blocking us today, is that we think we've still got tomorrow to make a change. And we really don't have that to work with. We got to make the change. Got to make it now, right? So, and it's easy to do one little thing at a time. I've found with this project, you don't have to do it all at once. But one little thing, a little thing, can be very potent. Just like this guy. He's very much like the vole, except even better. Now, this little weasel. They're highly respected in Blackfoot culture, and they're highly respected because they don't back down from a fight. They don't know that they're too little, right? They'll even take on food that's much bigger than them, and they'll take it. Anything comes after them, this is what it gets, right? They don't back down. They're going to fight. And so, I'm not all about fighting, but I'm about not buying into the the suggestion that's been put into our minds that we're too little. We're not too little, and there's no they to worry about. We need to do something about the blinders that we're wearing to block out these realities. We need to be able to see these, perceive them, and embody them, and use them to our advantage to make the changes that need to happen. We need to cut holes in the mask, right? Cut holes in the blindfold. When you cut holes in the blindfold, it's funny because right away you turn into a superhero, right? Cut holes in the blindfold, turn away from the rectangles. Be cautious of the rectangles. Don't trust them. And start making the changes that need to happen. And so, with my Resolute Salute project, what I've come up with as the resolution for this particular idea, which is resolution number 137, is that I will pay attention to how hypnosis and meditation, both external and internal, pertain to the issues being addressed with this project, as well as how they influence my own and others' perceptions of how to respond to these issues. Where hypnotic and meditative blocks are identified, I will consider how they might be broken, even if it means participating in reverse hypnosis, and I'll develop methods for avoiding both renewed exposure to the original influence and repetition of the meditative cycle that affects me personally. So that's the brief way that I've written out what I want to do with this resolution, but I think the main thing is more awareness, right? And realizing that meditation and hypnosis are not, as I had so often associated them with before, they're not these special things, these special practices that go on, in the New Age or in monasteries or what have you. They are our everyday. Every day we are hypnotized. Every day we are meditating, to ensure that we don't slip away from those suggestions that have been given to us by ourselves. And so I want to be more aware of this, and I think it will help me with my project, and perhaps it will help at some point if I find good ways to share successful strategies for making changes for those who want to. Maybe it'll help other people too.